I have with me Bogdan, who is the CVP of Azure Data Analytics at Microsoft. We are going to have an honest conversation around Fabric. Thank you so much for joining, Bogdan.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
Looking back on the Synapse era, what were the biggest positives and what were the hardest lessons learned?
So let's start with the positives. Synapse was the first attempt to bring together many data and analytics assets. We have plenty of those in Microsoft because we are, since 1997, we are building SQL Server, one more engine. And Synapse was the first attempt to say, look, we are going to bring all this data, to all these engines together and give the customers a single product where they get to choose the right engine for the right job. The vision was great, actually, but I think that to some extent we accomplished that vision only in Fabric, because in Synapse, and now I'm moving into the shortcomings of Synapse, while we did bring all the engines together, we were not able at the time to get all of them to operate on top of the same format. So if you look at what we had in Synapse, we had the Azure Data Factory, the so-called Synapse pipelines, as a mechanism to copy data in. We had a lake architecture, basically just an ADLS Gen 2 storage account. Then on top of this, you could serve SQL using what we call Synapse SQL Serverless, as well as the dedicated pools and the Spark engine. And I think we also added in public preview, I don't remember if it was generally available, the KQL, Azure Data Explorer, the telemetry engine. So now you had the ability to pipeline data through pipelines, to shape it to some extent with Spark. And then you had to make a tough choice. Are you going to do Synapse Serverless SQL on top of that data, or are you going to load that data using another pipeline into a dedicated warehouse? And herein lie the trade-off. With the serverless, you had a very nice elastic architecture. And actually, the Synapse Serverless had a paper in 2021. They were the first product to run TPC-H, I think, at 1 petabyte. The elasticity was there. But it lacked a very strong query optimizer. It lacked indexes and lots of things that actually make a data warehouse very powerful. The Synapse Data Warehouse Gen 2, the dedicated pools, on the other hand, it had all these really nice features, but it lacked the ability to operate with data in the lake. So customers were a bit torn between using the serverless, very scalable architecture, or using the dedicated, which had lots of very powerful features, but it stopped at a certain maximum capacity. I mean, there is no way to go beyond a certain size in data warehouse. So again, lots of good intentions. It worked very well for many customers. Truth being told, the open formats in 2018, when the Synapse 2017-2018 was, it was called Arcadia at the time, the open formats were not as powerful as they were later in 2020s. The research in how to make engines work on top of these formats was not as powerful either. So this is how I see Synapse. It's a very successful product. We still have lots of customers on that product. And to some extent, we built Fabric to work around and to solve exactly the core architectural problems that we had in Synapse.
Do you think that interoperability with Synapse, okay, do you think that has some perhaps negative implications as to what it means for Fabric if you're having to kind of retrofit some pieces so that it's backwards compatible too with some stuff? Or
no, it could have been a major risk. And this is why we decided that in Fabric, we are going to come clean. We are going to start from scratch. We did not optimize for backward compatibility. In fact, if you look at the data warehouse in Fabric is completely rewritten. It doesn't have any kind of backward compatibility with Synapse. It has an intellectual property compatibility in the sense that the dialect is the same. So for those customers who invested a lot in writing store procedures, views, and things like that, those just work. but the data itself is completely different format. I mean, in Fabric, we go completely Parquet Delta, while in Synapse, we had a very proprietary format.
For Synapse customers today, is the recommendation to migrate to Fabric?
At their own convenience. So given that it's a successful product, given that many customers are using it in production, we are fully supporting Synapse. But most of our innovation is going into Fabric. So the recommendation for them is the product is ready, the migration tooling are ready. Whenever you are ready, we are going to work with you and migrate you to Fabric, and you are going to be able to reuse all the investment you have in your store procedures, views, and everything else, plus the rest of the ecosystem, pipelines and Spark, Power BI integration, and the rest.
Azure Databricks runs natively on Azure as a first-party product. Yet I know that sometimes out on the field, there's a bit of competition, if you will, between Databricks and Fabric. And at the same time, sometimes there's a lot of better together stories that you see advertised. So then the question is this: where do you see Microsoft Fabric and Databricks working as a true better together architecture for organizations? And where do you think customers should view them more as an either or decision?
That's a good question. So let's build a bit upon this, on how Microsoft is thinking about this environment. So the Microsoft core offering is Azure, as you know. And as a strategy, we want, and it's not only a matter of what we talk, it's where we are really making massive investments. We want customers to feel if you keep your data in Azure, you have excellent integration with the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem. You have really good security. You have access to very good hardware. You have geo-distribution and so on and so forth. Fundamentally, what I'm describing here is what any hyperscaler wants to describe, right? So let's build on this. This is the core priority of Microsoft. Bring your data to Azure because good things are going to happen. And there are lots of infrastructure things that I'm not going to discuss here because we are talking about analytics and data, but you get, let's call this a top priority, a non-negotiable. Now, once you put your data in a place, as a customer, you probably have noticed this because it's a tendency for many years. Customers do not like to be locked in. They want to have at least the impression, and I'll qualify this in just a second, that they can use any other tool. And it's the impression, not because physically they cannot use any other tool, but because after you're spending lots of time with a specific tool, the cultural dependency on that tool becomes very strong and it makes it hard to move. But at least physically, customers want to have the certainty that they can switch from one tool to another. And as part of Microsoft's best offers to give you the best possible destination for your data, we really, in earnest, try to give customers access to as many engines as they want. This is why we have native products, we have partnership with Databricks, we have partnership with Snow, Oracle, you name it. If it runs software on top of data, it probably runs on Azure. So first, there is a certain level in Microsoft which says, bring your data to Azure, use whatever engine you want. Now, the Fabric effort started as an attempt to first unify all the Microsoft data technologies and say, you don't need to move data from one format to another between our engines. And then we started saying, okay, fine. If we want to have a unified format across all the Microsoft assets, should it go open source or should it go proprietary unified format? And say, we have so many customers that are very successful using Azure Databricks that it makes sense to go for Delta. I mean, there was at the time, Hoodie, Iceberg, and Delta were the three options. And they decided, okay, fine. There is certain skewness in the distribution of committers, but we are going to go with Delta because we love our customers. So this is where things are fitting together. This is where, as Microsoft, we want to make sure that Databricks, Snow, Oracle, Fabric, all of them are options to our customers. And if we stop for just a second here, it's a pretty good thing for a customer, right? I mean, essentially, you put your data in one place, in one format, no less. And sure, Iceberg and Delta are technically different format, but we know that they're converging. So you end up in this place. You put your data in a single place, and without any kind of copy pipelining or anything else, you have the option to play with some of the best analytical engine in the history of mankind. And you have the benefit of 3, 4 really talented teams of developers competing for your graces, right? As a customer. That's pretty much Microsoft vision. Now, if you go one step further, no developer team that I mentioned here is aspiring to go to second place. None of them is, I'm going to build the second best engine, to be fair. And in this point, in engine by engine, regardless of first party, second party, third party, whatever you choose to call it, of course, people are going to compete. And I think that's a very healthy thing. I think it's a good thing for Fabric to compete with Databricks, to compete with Node, to give people the best possible technology. Customers are not going to be hurt by this competition as long as we have the unified layer. So now, how is Microsoft considering Fabric? Say, okay, fine, we put the data in the same place. We have a number of other issues that we need to solve for things to be truly open to our customers. We have the ambition to solve the security problem. The security problem is kind of a difficult one. You can do RLS on top of Parquet in different environments, but there is not one solution other than the one security in Fabric, which is cross-engine, truly cross-engine. Now, you can put RLS on top of a format and say, if you're only accessing this through my engine, you have perfect RLS. That's what we've done with SQL in 2016. But it does not allow Power BI to operate RLS directly on top of the same storage. This is the limitation that the industry has right now. So this is what we want to put the security also as part of the uniformity layer and let the other engines compete on top of this. So going back to your question, where do I see things being better together? Where is room for Snow, for Databricks, for Fabric? Really in the heart of customers. Fabric is designed to accommodate all these customers and their preferences. And I think is good for customers. And I think, honestly, I think is good for Fabric and by extension for Databricks and Snow that we really fight each other on the best possible engine performance within the confines of an open standard that is actually only benefiting our customers.
There has been a lot of discussion around external semantic models flowing into Power BI. How do you reconcile the push for openness at the data layer, such as Iceberg, with, or Delta, with what some perceive as more resistance to openness at the semantic model layer?
I'll own this one. This was my call. And we are not talking about lots of conversations here. Let's be very specific. We are talking about the fact that Power BI stopped supporting metric views, right? That was primarily my call. And because it's a delicate call, it was verified and validated up and down by my team and by my managers. But I'll tell you exactly why I made this call. We ended up at some point a few months ago in a situation where we have a stack of semantic layers. Basically, metric views at the bottom, Power BI on top. And metric views were presented to Power BI to some extent as relational object. And they have a computational engine underneath. There's nothing wrong with this. We support this in a couple of cases. We discovered that we produce wrong numbers. Like in certain cases, we cannot guarantee the accuracy of those numbers. And the reason I made that call is that once we go out with something like this, we are going to get customers calling my engineers and saying, hey, the numbers are wrong. It's not something that we can control. I don't think it's fair to our customers because they're running businesses on Power BI. And I cannot guarantee that, at least to the best of my knowledge, I can never 100% guarantee because occasionally you have bugs. But I cannot guarantee that the system is actually solid. And it's not fair to my developers because they're going to get calls to support a feature that is actually not properly designed, thought through, and integrated in such a way as to support it. So this is, I do understand that in the light of the competitive conversation that we had before between engines, this looks like a big company play to diminish the competition. And whether you believe it or not, at the end of the day is your call. But fundamentally, I do not want my engineers to get midnight calls for support cases on a technology that they just cannot support and is not fully supported. It's a plugin. That's the main reason of that one. Now, what's going to happen in the future? I don't know if the open source levels for semantic modeling are as mature right now as Parquet was in 2021 when we made the decision to move. We do, in the light of this incident, we do want to very seriously look at what's the right avenue to figure out a better way to integrate semantic layers from other parts. But I cannot tell you right now exactly what's going to happen. But this is a very, very tactical decision based exactly on the pressure that incorrect numbers can put on my customers and my team.
Would you say that it is something that perhaps from a technical standpoint could be worked out or become a priority if you had enough customers that are your customers that are kind of asking like, hey, we need this integration, whereas right now you feel like it's been more vendor push for this integration? Is that a fair statement?
Everything we do in Power BI and analysis services is open source for 20 years, by the way. XMLA was an open protocol in 2000. We have Tableau is playing XMLA. So we have an openness in this direction since before many of the companies we are talking about here were a thing. So we don't object to open sourcing our model. We don't object. I mean, it is open source. We don't object to working with other vendors, but we need to figure out the best way to do that. So we are exploring that. We are exploring how to make sure that there is a certain openness of the semantic layer. Whether that is going to take the shape of adopting the metric views for Databricks or adopting OSI or going in other direction, just open sourcing our stuff and making it more accessible to other vendors, I cannot tell you right now. But what I took out of this is that there is a certain amount of customers that do care about interoperability of semantic layers between engines. And as always, we really, really put our customers on top. So more likely than not, we are going to have developments here relatively soon. I cannot tell you exactly what form those developments are going to take, but we heard our customers who were concerned about this. We actually did think very carefully, what does it mean for the Databricks customers? Because we have many Databricks customers, and as I told you, I care more about Azure than I care about I care about Fabric a lot, but Azure is the flagship product. And no Databricks customer is excluded. The relational integration with Databricks continues to be a top priority. Whether we do direct query or whether we do direct lake, customers of Databricks are absolutely fully supported and absolutely welcome to Fabric, and we do not want to disappoint them. That's still there.
Fabric launched roughly 3 years ago. What do you see as the biggest wins so far? And where do you think there is meaningful work still to be done?
So we launched in May 2023 the public preview, and in November 2023 the general availability. Before I answer your question, I need to tell you what I think now in hindsight that it was the biggest challenge that we had with Fabric. As I told you, in Synapse, you have many engines as part of a commercial offering, but there's not much technical integration between them. And you have a very different experience for serverless and things are there somewhere in Azure, and you can spin off one resource or another, but they're not designed to work together. So we are coming with Fabric, and they want to say, man, we want to give you a unified end-to-end integrated experience. Integrating things turns out to be very hard. And I'll tell you the traps that we discovered on the way. You start with the intention to make sure that customers that are using your product have an Office-like experience. In Office, everybody knows that If you know how to use Word, you know how to use PowerPoint. You're not great at PowerPoint, but copy paste, the main things are pretty much in the same place. Our ambition was to come up with a similar kind of unified analytics experience for Fabric. And you end up in the following situation. Either you create a unified interface, which is going to apply to everything else, or you have multiple different interfaces. If you do the former, you get unification and is very appealing to new users, but you are alienating people who have learned how to use the very specific UI of notebooks or the very specific UI of Synapse serverless. If on the other hand, you are catering to very different user groups, people are telling you, hey, it looks like 12 raccoons in a raincoat pretending to be a person. So trying to find the right golden path that gives enough of unification while respecting the individual preferences is something that is easier said than done. Let's look at something else. One of the initial problems with Fabric, which thankfully we solved now. Trying to discuss about private links. It means it carries a different UI and it behaves very differently in Spark, in Data Warehouse, in Power BI. Amongst other reasons, because Power BI are consumers who, regardless of the security of the data, very often they want to say, I don't care about this, I want to see my report on my cell phone. And somebody like a salty data engineer doing Spark will never accept that their data is even potentially accessible on the cell phone. So this thing is hard. And this is, this is probably the biggest problem that we had with Fabric, trying to find the right balance. So now back to your point. What I think we've done well, I think we've done a good job. So I think we managed to have uniform access and the same format across all engines, which in 2021 sounded like madness. And in 2023 still had a few number of gaps when some version of Delta doesn't work with one engine very well, it works with the other engine. I think we kind of solved that problem. We managed to finally ship the one security layer, which is a promise for 3 years, and now we have it. We managed to start finding the right balance between what is common in the user experience and how do we respect the notebook user? How do we continue to respect the Power BI user? How do we accommodate personalized experiences for individual product users while still having a suite as an end-to-end experience? So this is where we made lots of progress. Where we did not do as much progress as I'd like on monitoring or in governance. I still believe that there we have a bit of work to do. And the last thing that I think evolved beautifully over the last 2 or 3 years since we went to GA, the individual performance of the engines changed dramatically. On the data warehouse, on the Spark side, on all the fronts, we started making significant progress.
If you could go back to the Fabric launch and change one product, messaging, or go-to-market decision, what would that be?
I don't think I would. I actually thought about this quite a bit. I don't think I would change anything. I'll tell you why. Yeah, there were some things that in hindsight, we discovered that we have to change a bit the direction. But the discovery was the joy. That's how we learned. That's how we understood our customers better. And you need to go through a bit of impedance in a system to learn what is the friction that you want to remove and what is the friction that you want to keep. So frankly, in terms of big decisions, I think I don't think I would have changed that much. Yes, some things were not perfect, but we learned a lot from those things that were not perfect, and those made us a bit better today.
Zooming out beyond Fabric specifically, where do you think the data and analytics industry is headed over in the next few years?
Obviously, you're going to see more and more agentic development and agentic consumption of the data. And my strong impression is that we are not going to get LLMs to do joins or anything like this. You still need engines. Why get your LLMs to do joins? They're not designed for that. They're not relational models when you can focus them on generating queries. And we have pretty good engines all over the board for executing those queries. So I'm thinking of LLMs as producing queries, and you are going to get business users asking natural language questions converted by LLMs into queries. Okay, that's the pattern that I imagine. I mean, there is a bit of bias here. I'm building engines, so I'd like engines to be around. But I also believe that even if you get an LLM to do a perfect join over millions of rows, it's probably the most inefficient way to do that, unless you are asking the LLM to produce the query that is running the proper engine to do that. So with this in mind, what I really see is that the patterns of queries that are generated by agents are somewhat different from the patterns of queries that are generated by humans. Humans tend to operate in a relatively small fixed number of templates. You've seen that with static reports in the 2000s. You see that with the ad hoc reports. I mean, even if you are building some sort of direct query model, there is a small combination of queries that can be issued from any kind of BI solution. You are going to alternate a number of filters, you are going to change a number of aggregations, but it's kind of a fixed number of templates with minimal variability. If you are coming to agentic work, they're going to run any kind of queries, right? The spectrum that your engine has to cover concurrently is wildly different than what you are getting in standard BI. So what I think you are going to see, I think you are going to see the engines becoming better and better at dealing with high performance, high concurrency, high volumes of queries generated by agents. I think you are going to see a bit of a shift of the documentation from the HTML towards the Markdown. I love agent skills. You probably played with that as well. I think it's the way it should be, right? I think it's the very natural way to say we know how to design APIs for humans and how to document them. This is the way to design for agents. And now you see the LLMs getting smarter and smarter. I think that they are going to take over more and more. I think that all the value. Now let's go back to what happens. We are optimizing for a place where really many queries of heterogeneous shapes are going to get executed over larger and larger amounts of data. Some of the fundamentals of data preparation. What is the start schema? How do you normalize the data? How do you prepare a system for optimal query execution? I think are going to survive. I don't see how they're going to be changed dramatically. So I think that data experts, people who have spent their career understanding how data engine works and designing very efficient data models, are going to have a very fun time. They will use a different kind of technology to build the systems. They are going to use agentic technology. They are going to express their intentions in English more so than in SQL. But at the end of the day, it's still that wisdom, it's still that accumulated experience that is going to allow somebody to create an efficient data system that is to be used by agents. That's what I believe is going to happen over a few years. I also believe that, AI and BI, in terms of consumption of the data, are going to converge and become indistinguishable.
In a market with multiple major cloud platforms, what do you believe truly sets Azure apart from your AWS and your Google Cloud for data analytics and AI workloads as a whole?
At the infrastructure level, there are differences. And we take pride in our focus to security and customer resilience and all. But those to some extent are, if you step back far enough, the differences are relatively small. Like all the hyperscalers are very, very dedicated to their customers and all of them really care about security. I think that what sets Azure apart and Fabric apart compared to any other attempt at data is the fact that Microsoft historically is thinking all the way to the end. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. Data and analytics and everything else that we do, this is where money is being spent. But if you're coming from a CIO perspective, from a CEO's perspective, all this analytics business is a cost. It's a mean to an end. The end is not to have analytics. The end is to make sure that your business decision makers have access to insights. That's why analytics is happening, right? So, and I think Microsoft, compared to the others, is uniquely positioned to take what happens to Azure and to bridge it very, very efficiently into Office, into M365. Because business users are more often than not Office users, M365 users. This is what I think is the unique differentiator on Azure. That is, there are lots of other differences that we can discuss in specific, but I think this philosophically is fundamentally different compared to the other clouds. We want to make sure that people who are making decisions on top of data have a very, very open bridge to all the technologies that are powering the data. This applies in AI, this applies in BI. It applies even in something as simple as I want to share my spreadsheet with you. Yes, you can share a file on any platform. On Azure, you have information protection labels that are making sure that the Excel that is generated from a Power BI report and that I'm sharing with you on OneDrive will never be forwardable by email to an address outside of the company. And I think this matters. I think this really, really matters because I think Azure is the most business user-friendly cloud in this regard.
Thank you so very much for your time, Bogdan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure, and we can have a follow-up whenever we want. Thank you.
Thank you.